Hey, I'm Anna, Ableton Certified Trainer here. In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can use this.
Loving you was breaking me.
To create something like this. And something like this. Using the simpler and other audio effect devices. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so let's check out the vocals that we're gonna work with again.
Loving you was breaking me.
So in order to create those instruments, we're gonna bring in the simpler, and then we're gonna drag the vocals into the device. There we go. And the simpler got two main areas, the sample area and the control area. If we press on this toggle button, then we are able to open up the sample area where we can resize the window, and we can also zoom in and out and just generally see a bit better what we are doing. Simpler is an instrument in live with basic sampling and subtractive synth functions. So now I'm playing the notes. And we can notice straight away that the higher the pitch I play, the shorter the sample becomes, and the lower the pitch, the longer. So if I press on warp, then I can time stretch this piece of audio. There we go. We're gonna also switch to Complex Pro in the warping algorithms, so we get access to the formants. And the formants maintains this kind of natural throat sound when we are pitching audio. So we're going to stay in classic mode where we have the loop function, which I just enabled. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the start of the loop and then the length of the loop. So now we're looping this small portion of audio. And straight away I'm playing the audio back as an instrument. So we're gonna go to a lower octave because I'm planning to create a bass sound. So we're gonna change the formants and the envelope as well, which defines the spectral characteristics of the audio. Now we're gonna move down to the control area, but before, I'm gonna set the voices to 1 because I want to create a monophonic instrument. So even if I play multiple notes, there's only one beat triggered at the time. So down here in the control area, let's just apply some filter settings. Just a little bit of low pass filter. And then I'm also gonna change the filter type. So then I get access to this drive. And these are just different circuit types with different sound characteristics. So once I'm happy with this, I'm gonna bring in the tuner because it's actually really important that we trigger the note that we intended to trigger. So we might need to tune the instrument a little bit. So I wanna play in F minor, so I'm gonna set that up on my push. So all these colored pads should be triggering the root note, which is F. So if I press on that, actually, we are pretty close to F. So let's just apply just a little bit of detuning to move closer to F. So I'm happy with that. Let's move into the amplitude envelope. So I want to create for this bass sound a little slower attack so it doesn't have that much impact at the beginning of the note when I press on it. A bit slower. Okay, so now it took off the edge from the beginning of the note. Let's also go ahead and ease on the CPU. So if we right-click, control-click in the sample area, we can choose Crop Sample to remove the unused audio. We can also add some modulation as well by adding a LFO. So let's set something up just to try it. So we can feed the LFO into the filter. And we can also feed this into the volume. Change the rate. But I'm actually not going to use any of this because I'm going to use a different technique to modulate this sound later. Now let's go ahead and bring in the next device, which is the saturator that I'm going to use to add some transient shaping, warmth and distortion. So I'm using the wave shaper mode, and if we click on this toggle button, then we can bring in additional parameters to play with. So the first thing I'm going to set up is add some drive, quite a load of it. And with that, I'm also going to bring back the output so the sound doesn't get super loud when we press on the button. Be careful with that. And then I'm going to change the bass and then add a little bit of depth. Then change the drive, which will influence how much of these new parameters are affecting the sound. So let's change the curve. Little more drive. Set the dump, which behaves like a super fast noise gate. Let's set the period, which will work together with the depth when I set that up too. So the curve is already set, which is responsible for adding more harmonics. So if we set the linear, that will work together with the curve and the depth. So now let's add the depth in, which will add in a sine wave to the wave shaper curve. Okay, now let's bypass this. So we can really hear the difference what the saturator is doing. So I'm pretty happy with that, so we can go ahead and bring in the chorus ensemble, because I really want to widen this sound up. So first thing first, we're gonna roll off the very low frequencies. We can set up here. And then I'm gonna stay in classic mode because I'm happy with the two additional voices. So we can set up the amount, a bit of feedback, add some warmth, which is a bit of filtering, and some extra distortion because that's never enough. What was really important here is to roll off the raw frequencies because we definitely don't want to widen those up, but because this bass got such rich harmonics and overtones now, there is a lot to work with at the top end where the chorus can really shine. And I'm already bringing in the next device, which is erosion, so we can add some noise, and specifically some white noise. This is a super effective and simple device to add in some great sounding noise. And talking about the top end, we're gonna actually bring in the next device now, which is the iconic OTT preset from Multiband Dynamics. Anybody who's producing bass music must have heard of it. I'm not even really gonna tweak it, but I'm definitely gonna pull the amount back a bit. Oof, dirty, aggressive sound. So next up, we're gonna bring in a auto filter. And this is where the modulation will come, or at least one part of it. So you can obviously play with the frequency cutoff, which can be even, automated later throughout the arrangement to bring in extra movement. But we can also bring in the LFO. And we can play with the phase to offset the waveforms for the left and right channel. And we can change the rate that's currently synced to beat divisions. Pull back the amount. This could be totally fine, but I've got a better idea. So I'm gonna bring in the LFO, which is a Max 4 Live device. And what we can do here, we can map this LFO, which is a sine wave right now, to any parameters on the auto filter. So I just assigned it to the frequency cutoff. So it's going a bit wild, so I'm gonna give it a minimum setting. So the cutoff is not going all the way down. Change the rate to beat divisions. I just prefer this device rather than the built-in LFO settings in the auto filter, because I just feel like it gives me a bit more control over my LFO. Next up, we're going to bring in the EQ8 because I'd like to apply some mid-side EQing to this sound. So we're going to put the EQ to mid-side mode, which allows me to control the mid and the sides of the stereo field. So we're going to start off with adjusting these sides. So what we really don't want in the sides of our mix is low frequency. So we're going to roll off everything below like 200-ish hertz. And then we can switch to the mids. And I'm actually gonna push a little bit of the lows, but just in the middle, so it's not bleeding into the sides of my mix. Really great tool for some additional separation. And now the final little touch, we're gonna bring in hybrid reverb. This device got everything that you could ever want from a reverb. We've got two areas, the convolution area and the algorithmical area. They are both on right now. So in the convolution area, it's not just that you can choose from like real places where impulse responses were captured, but you can also use your own impulse responses if you recorded any or if you downloaded some from the internet. You can also set up the convolution and the algorithmical side, how they interact with each other. So they can go in serial as it is now, so one goes into the other, they can go parallel, or we can have just the algorithmical side or just the convolution side. So I'm gonna keep just the convolution side on for now, and let's go to the presets of holes and find this big clear impulse response. Now, the one thing we definitely don't want is low frequencies with reverb, so we're going to go to the EQ and then roll off the low frequencies so they don't get the reverb applied to them. Somewhere like this. There we go. So, no mod. Now, let's go down an octave. That is spicy. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just quickly group all these devices together so I can bypass them in the same time without the processing. With it. Actually, I decided I want to use this sound to create another bass sound. So for that reason, I removed the low frequency boost I made earlier because that's going to come from the other bass. So duplicated the track, bypassed the reverb, and then changed the settings on the auto filter. So this version of the bass is giving that lower subby kind of sound. So let's bypass. So we used that little vocal snippet to create two bass sounds out of it. Now we are ready to start creating the pad sounds, so we're going to bring in another instance of Simpler and then drop the vocals down there, open up the sample view. I warped the audio again and changed the mode to Complex Pro. Now we're still in classic mode where we can enable looping and then set the start point. And then the loop length. and then move the loop position. So once we found our little sound, the voices, we're gonna leave it as we wanna create a polyphonic instrument. We can move down to the control area, set the filter again. I'm just gonna leave it and apply a clean filter. Set the amplitude envelope again. Slow attack because we're trying to create a pad sound, and also we need a long release. So when I let go of the pad and stop triggering the sound, there's still a long time while the sound is still fading out. Let's apply some spread, which generates 2 detuned voices per note. So it really widens the sound up. Add some randomness to the panning. Again, we can also apply some modulation. So we got the LFO sync to beat division again, and I'm feeding it into the filter to modulate it. Nice, I'm pretty happy with that. So we're ready to bring in the tuner again, just to, make sure that we're triggering the note that we want to trigger. This is actually quite bang on, so I'm not even going to detune any further. So next up, we're gonna bring in an EQ just to simply roll off the low end, so the bass can cut through a little better later and the sound is a little bit more light. Okay, that's enough there. And then next up, I brought in a saturator, just simple analog clip, little bit of drive added, nothing crazy. And then we're also adding phaser and flanger. I'm using the phaser, and we can also use this little toggle to open up additional parameters. So I'm just gonna quickly set the center, which defines the center frequency of the notches. And then the spread, which is the spacing between the 2 notches in terms of frequency. And then the blend between the center frequency and the spread. Set the feedback. And the amount of the LFO that's being applied. Now I'm going to change the LFO's waveform to a sine wave. Play with the phase offset between the waveforms in the right and left channel. Add some filtering and distortion by the warmth setting. Now I'm pretty happy with this, so we are ready to bring in the next device, which is my favorite preset from the Echo device, which is called Distant. Now the sound is really spacey and moody, and I love it. Again, I'm gonna group the devices together so I can bypass them. Everything's on. Bypass. There we go. We created a pad sound out of the vocal snippet. Ready to move on, so brought in another instance of Simpler, but quickly let's do some housekeeping. So I just renamed that pad channel to a pad so I know what it is. And I dropped the vocals into the new Simpler instance, and this time I'm gonna go to slice mode because I wanna create some vocal chops. I'm gonna adjust the starting point of the sample because I actually want to work with the beginning of the loop this time. we need to warp the sample and change again the warp mode to Complex Pro.
You left and it set me free.
Perfect. We're going to open the sample view again so we can see better, and then head to the slice mode. And before I do anything else, I'm just going to crop the sample just to ease on the CPU. And we can straight away see that there are already some slices created. And these slices were created by the transient, which we can see here. So we can try out different other options, which can be beat divisions, and then change the division. And then we can go to regions, which will just split it into equal regions according to the number that we specify. But I'm going to go to manual mode because I want to create these slices manually. So I can just double click and that will give me a slice, or I can double click on the slice again and then that will remove it. So let's set up the first slice.
You left and it set me free.
And then the second one.
And it set me free. You left.
Okay, so I just finished adding in all the slices I wanted. Let's just quickly add some reverb and delay by using the main sends to send to these effects. I also added a compressor and an auto filter that we can trigger later. I think I want to use the chops as they are, but if we right-click on the sample area, we could choose the option to slice to new MIDI track. Now what this did is created an extra MIDI track which has all the slices in a drum rack. And as you see, it also gave us the original sequence programmed. So we're going to get rid of that because obviously we would want to create our own sequence. So let's open up the drum rack. And as you see, the first slice in its own simpler now, and so is the second. So we can make tweaks to the individual slices that we couldn't do before because all the slices were living in the same simpler. So we can apply a filter to the first slice, which won't affect the other slices. And then maybe we can apply a different filter, like a high-pass filter, to this slice. We could also add some modulation to the filter, just on this one specific slice. Change the waveform of the LFO, the rate. And additionally, we can also insert effects onto these slices independently. So maybe let's bring in a delay and insert that to slice 4. Also, let's bring in hybrid reverb and insert that to slice 3. Pull back the driver a bit. Now we got enough elements, we are ready to start recording. So let's start it with recording the pads. Now I'm going to duplicate this pad track because I want to play some single notes on the top of this chord as well. So I'm going to delete that clip, try out some notes. Let's record. Great, I am happy with that. Now let's move on and record in the bass line. That sounds great to me, but let's go and tidy up the notes because it wasn't really important with the past to quantize them because that was such a long release time, but it's quite crucial with the bass line though. So I'm gonna select the notes and then right click and hit quantize. Okay, so I organized everything into a little sketch with a couple of scenes. I sequenced the bass tabs and the vocal chops as well. I brought in some drums and I recolored and organized everything. So let's just have a little listen. There we go. So this is how you can use any audio to create new instruments out of them in live with Simpler. Thank you for watching this video and I'll see you next time.